but I was able to see the Red Wings in a Stanley Cup. They lost that particular game, but we're hoping they can eventually get back there. But got to follow the coverage of some of the guys on the beat here, like Michael Whitaker of the Hockey News. We're happy to have him on. Haven't had him on before, but he does great work for the Hockey News, and he's been on the beat for a while, and want to get his takes. But Michael, we always celebrate the thing of the day, so I'm curious. It's National Time Travel to whenever you would want to day, and I'm curious what era or what event you would time travel to if you were given the option here. Would you go and see the old Red Wings? What would you do here?
Honestly, I would probably go back to the legendary 01-02 team. I'm sure you remember, but there was really quite nothing like it. So many Hall of Famers, so many just legendary figures of the game that were all on the same team, coached by Scotty Bowman. It really seems like we're never going to see something like that again. It was truly a time to be a Red Wings fan.
That's a good answer. I do remember that team fairly well. That was kind of in my sweet spot of watching them growing up. That I thought you might want to go back to like the old days, like the Gordie Howe days, to see Gordie Howe, see Ted Lindsay, because that would have been interesting to see that brand of hockey, especially because that was kind of similar in how many stars they had back in that era. Although the game was very different back then. We've actually had Phil Esposito on the show, and he talked about that era, and it's just funny to see the differences between where they're at now, and then talk to Phil about how he basically had to do everything but drive the Zamboni in between periods to run, to do basically have the team stay up and running. He had to lace boots up for people, lace skates up. He had to do everything in the course of his career, and he's one of the top hockey players of all time. So it would have been interesting to watch that era, I think.
Yeah, it certainly would have been. I'm not sure if you saw it, but I actually recently did a exclusive interview with Paul Woods, who was a Red Wings captain. Actually, at one time in his career, he started playing in the late 1970s. I think Phil Esposito probably was still playing at that time. Did a whole range of topics with him, going from how he was selected in the Red Wings waiver draft in '77. He got to play in the last couple of seasons at Olympia Stadium before the move over to Joe Louis Arena. Obviously, that was still kind of in the dead Wings era, if you will, but he was part of the team that first started playing at Joe Louis, and it was certainly a different era of hockey back then. He had some pretty tremendous insight into everything that went into the game, and of course, his work now as a color commentator. He's actually the longest serving color commentator in Detroit sports history. So it was pretty cool sitting down with him and getting some of his insight from that era of hockey.
I did see that article. That was a good one. I didn't realize that until you said that in the article. I was at an event actually with him. He took part in the Polish Sports Hall of Fame festivities that I was at last year, and him and Ken Cal were both there, and yeah, it was interesting listening to both of those guys, and that's a lot of history there, because not only did they have the history of him playing and being part of that era, but now he's basically been part of every era since, kind of like a Mickey Redmond, who people are familiar with if they watch it on the TV side, who's from the same era. That there's a wealth of knowledge there, and it's fun to listen to those guys, because the game has changed immensely, kind of like we talked about with Esposito. It's changed immensely since that time, so it's got to be interesting to see it through his eyes and be able to do a long form interview with him like that.
Yeah, it certainly was. Both him and Mickey have been doing color commentary for the Red Wings. I know that Mickey started with the Red Wings, then he went to Hockey Night in Canada for a couple of years, and then I think he's been back with the Red Wings since the mid-1980s, I think it has been. And I think that was right around the same year that Paul Wood started as a color commentator, give or take a year or two. But yeah, they both started right around the same time in the mid to later 1980s as color commentators for the Red Wings, and they've certainly seen it all here in the last several decades.
That's one of the underrated things I think about the market as a whole, the Detroit market, because we talk a lot about the teams, and as a whole, the teams are playing pretty well right now, and obviously it's a good fan base. The word grit gets thrown around a lot, and they're interesting, hardworking, blue-collar teams that kind of emulate the city as a whole. But one thing that I find interesting talking about all these different sports with different writers like yourself and different pundits and athletes in the different sports is that we are kind of spoiled on the commentary side of things. I think in all these sports, the Red Wings have two very long lasting pairs, like you're talking about with Paul Woods and Ken Cal, and then Daniels and Redmond on the TV side. But these guys have been in the market forever, and they're very knowledgeable, they're entertaining, and that's true kind of across the sports, I think, to a degree. Obviously the Lions are a little different because they've got the NFL does it differently, and they don't have local broadcasters, but on the radio side they do, and that's been pretty consistent. The Tigers had Hartwell and then Dickerson, and now Benetti is doing very well there. The Pistons have had George Blaha, who just went into the Hall of Fame. So there's value to having long-lasting commentators like that. Jeff, you hit your mic here. You've been listening to these guys forever here.
Yes, I have. Grew up listening to the radio. All three teams, Lions, mostly Red Wings and Tigers, though. Growing up with Ernie Harwell, and absolutely, I would gladly. In fact, I was always trying to teach my son, to listen on the radio and just use your imagination to see what's going on the ice or on the baseball diamond. It was, and he just, once TV and social media just kind of took over, he kind of lost that interest. But yeah, growing up and listening on the radio was always first for me.
There's something classic about being able to listen to it on the radio and listen to have them have to describe everything, because it's still viable nowadays, and there's something to that because the descriptions are different. Even when you listen to like a Dickerson, who did a lot of TV this year, he's different when he's on the radio versus on the TV because he has to be. And Michael, I think that's probably one of the reasons the interview was so good with Paul, because these guys have so much knowledge. They have to have knowledge of every facet of the game to be able to talk about it night in and night out like they do.
Well, I think that's certainly one of the positive aspects of having somebody who actually played the game as a commentator, maybe not somebody who necessarily, kind of grew up with that career aptitude of, I want to be a broadcaster or something, but obviously they have their own kind of unique view to bring to things, because obviously they've been on the ice before, even if it was in a completely different era. They have the experience and knowledge that, so few people in the world have, of having played in the NHL, and, they can bring their own special and unique perspectives to everything and kind of explain things maybe to maybe novice fans who maybe not know quite as much. They'll be able to give their spin on things having actually played the game. And so I think that's actually one of the cool things of having guys like the Paul Woods and Mickey Redmonds, and obviously around the NHL we have so many former players who have kind of gotten into the same thing, and so they certainly bring a unique perspective.
Especially when they transition to the commentating side fairly quickly after their careers, because then they're inherently keeping up with all the changes. Sure, he played in a different era, but they've seen all of the different eras, of which there's been many forms, and Redmond still goes down and sees it at the ice level here for the TV broadcast. So yeah, I'm glad you got to do that piece. That's pretty cool. That I didn't expect to talk about that one that much, but that was a fun segment to be able to highlight that. We'll talk about the modern day Wings and how they're doing, and talk about some of Michael's coverage here after the break. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. I'm curious about your thoughts on the team after covering them, because we do cover all of the Detroit teams across the board, the primary four major league teams, and the Red Wings kind of gotten lost in the shuffle, it seems like, a little bit on kind of the primary coverage market. But I think they're a very interesting team. The more now that we've been covering them every week for the show, they seem like they're on the precipice of something bigger potentially. There's some guys that are playing pretty well. They've got young guys in the fold that have made their impact this year. That they've had some kind of low key free agent acquisitions. One in particular that's playing pretty well right now, and those guys have played above probably their contract value coming in, most of the free agents. But I'm curious, kind of some of your general thoughts about the team, seeing them up until this point, because this is a very crowded playoff picture. Obviously, we're a ways away from the playoffs, but it's going to be crowded, and people are going to be beating each other up all year. So I'm curious your thoughts on the Red Wings so far, and what they can kind of do to get over the hump here. Oh, you there, Michael? I don't know if we lost him. Jeff's going to figure that out. I think we may have lost him. Maybe he just wanted to do the one segment here. He wanted to talk about Paul Woods, and then he got off. We might have lost him here, but that's okay. I do think this is an interesting team because they have a lot of pieces. And it's interesting to get people's takes every week because we try to bring on different pundits for all of these sports. And they do have a lot of pieces. It feels like everybody feels like they're not quite there, obviously because of the record and because of the fact that they need to shore up some of the pieces in their game, the transition, the defense. But I do feel like they're building for the future. I think we have Michael back on. Are you on, Michael? Are you there? Do we have you, Michael? Nope. I don't know if we have him. We're having technical difficulties. I think he might have actually time traveled. I think he might have actually gone back to 2001 and we lost him. So I don't know. See, this is what happens with time travel. You have the butterfly effect that happens. And now that Michael went back to 2001, now we don't know what happens. Now the present day has changed. Now there's all sorts of things that have changed. But do we have you on here, Michael?
Hey there, yeah, sorry about that. I can hear you now. I think may have been a problem with my connection or something like that. So
no problem. We were worried you left us to go back and watch since we were.
And now I'm not hearing anything.
You can't hear anything? Jeff's trying to figure things out here. If you can hear me, jump back in. We're going to do if you can hear me now, the Verizon ads here. Are you there, Michael?
Hi there. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm here. Are you able to hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. I think I must have some kind of a connection issue here. So hopefully that I don't disappear again like that.
Usually, I don't have the problem where people can't hear my voice. That is not a complaint that I get very often.
Me neither.
so it's kind of refreshing to have it once in a while. But I don't know what you heard of the intro to that question, but I'm just curious to get your take here on the team so far, because I do feel like they have a lot of pieces, and it's been an interesting team to cover, but obviously they're kind of in the middle of the pack here. It's going to be a competitive season, it seems, in the bracket to make it to the playoffs. And I'm curious what you've seen so far and what stuck out to you in your coverage and what they kind of need to do to break away from the pack here.
Obviously, the biggest problem for them so far is their the defensive and goaltending issues. Right now, they're pretty fortunate that their record, they're, I believe, only 1 or 2 points out of the top spot in the Atlantic Division. Had they played adequate defense in several games recently, I'm thinking like the loss to the Nashville Predators. Games like that, I mean, they could easily be in first place right now. So it's very good to see some of the usual suspects are continuing to, play at such a high level. You got guys like the Alex DeBrincats, Dylan Larkins, Lucas Raymonds continuing to do their thing. Patrick Kane is continuing to put up points, even though he wasn't necessarily scoring up until recently, but he is producing at almost a point per game pace. We have, James Van Riemsdyk is starting to heat up after kind of a slower start. And then obviously you have so many of the rookie players who have stepped in and made made an impact. Obviously, you got Emmett Finney, who scored in the most recent game against the Kraken. Nate Danielson, and him and Axel Sandin-Pellikka are still kind of finding their bearings at the NHL level, which is to be expected for most rookies. And I guess some nights you don't really know what team you're going to get. You can get the team that looks like the one that rattled off 5 straight wins earlier in the season and looked like they're really on their way. And then other nights when they drop games against opponents that they just should not be losing to, kind of reminds me and certainly other people about kind of the way they were playing last season before the coaching change was made. And so it really is a matter of finding consistency. It's something that Todd McClellan has repeatedly talked about game management, and he directly challenged them after their loss on opening night to Montreal, basically asking, like, are we tired of this yet? And they certainly responded well. That was that 5-game winning streak, but then some of those problems have started to creep back in. But overall, like I said, they're in a good position right now. The Atlantic Division is so tight because there's only a couple of points difference between the different spots in the division. There, only a swinger of 2 or 3 points can be the difference between third and fifth place. And so right now, let's hope that the Red Wings are able to kind of find a consistent defensive footing. And, as long as the top producers continue, I think there is a good chance that they could potentially end their playoff streak or the playoff drought this season. We'll have to see what happens from this point.
I think that's one reason I'm hopeful about this team, because you highlighted some of the players that they've added, and really there weren't a lot of subtractions from last year. They had to send a couple guys down to the Griffins to make things work, but then they pulled up some of those young guys that you're talking about, and a lot of the new. Sorry guys,
I think I'm losing you again here.
I'm not sure we can hear you well. So yeah, I think it's on your side. Can you hear me? We might we might have to reconnect with Michael at a later time here. I think he's having a tough time hearing us, but I'm going to continue with what I was saying there. I think it's interesting. I think that's one of the reasons I find this team so interesting is they have a lot of new pieces, and they have the new coach at the basically mid-year last year. They were a moving franchise, they had moving pieces the entire year last year, and now things are solidified. They got the coaches kind of locked in. They've had McClellan's had an opportunity to have his coaches installed, have an off season with the team, have a camp with the team. Then you don't lose much, and you add in a lot of young guys and a lot of new guys. I think a lot of this is just getting a feel for being on the ice at the same time, where the guys align on the actual lines, and then you've got the natural inherent improvement that people are hopefully going to make as the year goes on. Casper hasn't found his footing this year. You got to think that Gibson's going to settle in a little bit more. You got these young guys that should be getting better as the season goes on. Some of the guys he mentioned, and Finney and Danielson hasn't played much, Sandin-Pellikka. So I feel like they have the most margin for potential improvement out of a lot of these teams in the NHL, because I've been trying to figure out, Jeff, we talk to Red Wings folks every week, and it seems like their excitement is more tempered than mine. I think that's why I'm excited, because you've seen this in different sports franchises over the years. If you have primarily an older team, then you got to worry about attrition as the year goes on. You got to worry about the higher risk of injury. You got to worry about maybe they've got too many minutes on their legs, too much playing time. Whereas if you have young guys, they're learning things every game. They're in more and more situations, and this is a younger, newer team. Between the young guys that they have on the team and the free agents, they have the force change that can potentially multiply and go a little bit exponential instead of linear as the season goes on.
And unfortunately, the division is so competitive, you don't have the time to get these young kids up to speed. They're like, let's go. The inconsistency it's so frustrating, especially for fans, You know, when Yzerman's under so much pressure and his time is up, it's like, let's go. You've been here long enough. This team needs to do it. And you wonder, is it the coach? The goalie would look great. He looks great one night. And then again, like Michael said earlier, they're losing to teams they just shouldn't lose to.
They have a penchant for playing close games. You gotta
like
take
everyone.
Yeah, you gotta have your blood pressure be pretty steady during these games, because it's like they score a goal and within 5 minutes they're giving up a goal. I don't know if it's something with the transition defense or what have you, but it's just an interesting team to watch, and I'm hoping between the coaching staff being able to get more hands on this team and get a better handle, and the young guys kind of the multiplication factor, I'm hoping they can improve here a little bit. But yeah, we'll get Michael back on at some point in time. Didn't work out with him this time. We got a few takes from him, and then we'll have more Red Wings coverage throughout the season. But we'll take a quick break here, and then Jeff and I will regroup and finish out the final segment on our own here. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel. And